They mocked my memory loss. Until they realize what I am hiding. I was born in a time when silence was expected of women, especially wives, and especially mothers. I learned to swallow my pride, hold my tongue, and keep the peace, even when it meant pretending I did not see what I saw or hear what I heard. But at 78 years old, after burying my husband, and giving 40 years of my life to a family that would rather forget I existed, I made the mistake of forgetting a name. And for that, they never let me forget who I was. It happened on a Wednesday evening in late fall, just after dinner. The wind outside howled against the cracked siding of our modest Colorado home. My bones ached, like they always did when the temperature dropped too fast. Paul, my only son, sat across from me at the dinner table, pushing peas around his plate with the disinterest of a man who'd long stopped caring what his mother cooked or whether she ate at all. His wife, Haley, hovered in the kitchen, arms crossed like she was guarding some invisible line I was not allowed to cross. I reached for the salt. My hands shook a little, but that was nothing new. "Marcus, could you pass me that napkin?" I asked, without looking up. The silence that followed was louder than any thunderstorm. "Who the hell is Marcus?" Haley snapped, spinning around with her eyebrows raised so high they nearly touched her forehead. I blinked. My fingers stiffened. I meant Paul. Haley cut me off. "You just what? Decided to call your son by the name of your old flame? Isn't that man dead? You still fantasizing about him in front of your family?" Paul set his fork down with a clink. "You know Dad hated that guy. You know that." I swallowed. The taste of dinner was gone now, replaced by something bitter at the back of my throat. It was a mistake. My memory. "Your memory is convenient," Haley sneered. "Right when it's your turn to do dishes or remember who you raised, suddenly you're all foggy." I could feel my grandson's eyes on me. He had his phone out, he always did. I saw the red circle on his screen. He was recording. Again. "Yo guys," he whispered into the mic, trying to stifle a laugh. "Granny just called Dad by some dead dude's name. What was it? Marcus? She thirsty for ghosts now?" They all laughed. My own flesh and blood, laughing at a slip of the tongue like it was some kind of circus trick. And all I could do was sit there, my fingers still trembling, my eyes fixed on the wall behind Paul where my husband's portrait used to hang. They had taken it down last month, said it was clutter. If you feel justice deserves celebration, smash that hype button. Let us keep stories like this alive, echoing far, far away. Your support helps us bring understanding and love to those who deserve it. Thank you so much. Keep listening. I did not cry. I do not cry in front of people who think tears are a weakness. But in that moment, something shifted inside me. A small part of me, one I had buried years ago under duty and guilt, rose up like a flame finding oxygen. Maybe I had forgotten a name, but I had not forgotten how they made me feel. Haley turned her back on me and started stacking dishes with unnecessary force. She's just doing this for attention. First, it was the oven left on, then forgetting the dog's name. Now this. "Paul, we need to talk about getting someone in here, maybe full-time." "She does not need a caretaker," Paul muttered, though he did not sound certain. "She's not that bad." "Not yet, but she's slipping. And if we do not act now, she could hurt herself or us." I wanted to scream, to slam my hand on the table and remind them who paid the down payment on this house, who watched their son when they went on vacations, who still folded laundry while they pretended I was invisible, but I stayed quiet. That was the role I had learned to play. The only sound in the room was the clink of cutlery and the soft hum of the dishwasher kicking on. My grandson had already posted the video. He was snickering to himself, reading the comments aloud. "Yo, that's wild. Grandma got ghosted and still catching feelings. Oh my God, internet loves you, Granny." I stood up. My knees cracked like dry branches. "I'm going to bed." No one answered. Upstairs, I closed the door to my small room, the one they call the guest room when they have company. I sat on the edge of the bed, held the frame of the old photograph I had hidden in the closet. It was dusty, worn at the corners, but still whole, just like me. They thought I was broken. They thought I was slipping, But that night, I decided, let them believe it. Let them all believe I was losing my mind. It was the only way I could keep my memory safe. They thought I had fallen asleep forever, like my memories were little birds flying out the window, never to return. But what they did not know was that I had started writing everything down, quietly, carefully. I was not slipping. I was preparing. 2 years ago, I suffered a minor stroke. The doctor called it a warning shot, something that could have been worse. I had some memory fog afterward, slower processing, occasional confusion. But nothing like what Haley kept insisting on. She painted me as a walking hazard, to herself, to Paul, to the family, and soon, to the finances. She started keeping a chart on the fridge. Mom's memory incidents. Every time I forgot a date, a name, or turned the kettle on twice, she wrote it down like a prosecutor building a case. Even the day I called the neighbor's dog Charlie, instead of Chester, made the list. Then came the doctor calls. Hi, yes, this is Haley Bradford. My mother-in-law lives with us, and we're starting to see serious cognitive decline. She mistook my husband for a stranger yesterday. We're worried. Can we schedule an evaluation? I heard her say it through the wall, like I was not even there. That was the day I knew. They were not waiting for me to fade, they were hurrying it along. Paul barely looked me in the eye anymore. When I tried to ask him if everything was okay, he muttered something about work, then changed the subject. But I saw the documents in the kitchen drawer one afternoon when Haley left it open. Pamphlets about guardianship, legal templates, a checklist for declaring mental incompetence. They were planning to take control of my life. Legally, irrevocably. And if I did not do something soon, I would wake up one day without a home, without a voice, and without a name. So I called Marcia Bennett. She was once my student, back in 1986, a soft-spoken girl with bright eyes and a steel-trap mind. Today, she was a clinical psychologist with her own private practice, and more importantly, someone who owed me nothing but remembered everything. I left a message on her voicemail. Marcia, it's Joanna. I need you, not as a friend, as a witness. She called back the next day. We met for coffee that weekend, 3 towns over, far from anyone who might recognize me. I explained everything. The stroke, the way they twisted every minor lapse into madness, the TikToks, the chart on the fridge. She listened without blinking. And then, quietly, she slid a folder across the table. I've been documenting your cognitive state for 2 years now, she said. Every visit, every test, every conversation. You are not incompetent. You are grieving. You are isolated. But you are still sharp. And now, you are under attack. I nodded. My hands trembled not from age this time, but from the sudden rush of knowing I was not crazy. Marcia helped me contact a legal trustee, someone independent, discreet. His name was Frank LeBlanc, and he specialized in estate protection for elderly clients. Within 2 weeks, I had quietly transferred control of my assets to a trust fund in my name, with Frank as its only administrator. Paul and Haley knew nothing. That was the day I started acting. I began mixing up days of the week on purpose. I started writing grocery lists in giant block letters, then forgetting where I put them. I asked Paul if he had seen my wedding ring, even though I never wore one. I called Haley Margaret every other day. Sometimes I stirred an empty pot on the stove, humming like a little girl. At first, they were amused, then delighted. She's declining fast, Haley whispered one night. I heard her through the vent. This is perfect. We'll have full power of attorney before Christmas. I just want what's best for her, Paul mumbled. That was the moment I finally saw my son for what he was, not evil, but weak. A man who would rather believe his wife's narrative than confront the truth. A man who forgot who raised him. Let them believe I was slipping. Let them relax. Because every word they spoke, every plan they made, I logged. In a brown notebook I kept behind the pantry, behind the jar of decaf coffee no one ever touched. And just for good measure, I installed a voice-activated recorder under the dining table, courtesy of my late husband's old toolbox. My memory was not the one at risk. Theirs was. I woke up one morning, and the house no longer looked like mine. The walls, once filled with faded family portraits, me in my wedding dress, Paul as a toddler in overalls, the four of us at the Grand Canyon, had gone blank overnight. At first, I thought it was the early light playing tricks on me. But as I walked down the hallway in my slippers, I saw what had really happened. The old frames were gone. In their place were fresh, glossy prints. Haley in her wedding dress, laughing like she had won something. Paul in a crisp navy suit, his arm around her waist. My grandson posing shirtless at the gym, flexing for strangers. The living room wall, once anchored by the portrait of my late husband in uniform, now held a canvas print of Haley holding a wine glass beside a sign that read, "This house runs on love, laughter, and a little bit of wine." My husband had died stone sober. He never even touched a drop. "Haley," I called softly, though I already knew the answer. "Where is the photo of Richard?" She did not even look up from her laptop. "I put it in the garage. Thought we could declutter. The house needs a new energy." I stood there in silence, trying to breathe past the tightness in my chest. "He was your father-in-law." She finally glanced up. "He's gone. No need to turn the place into a shrine." That night, after they all went to bed, I crept into the garage. The box labeled "Old Family Stuff" had been shoved behind dusty paint cans and broken camping gear. I dug through it with trembling hands until I found the frame. My husband, in black and white, smiling softly like he knew a secret. I pressed the photo to my chest. The glass had cracked. I took it upstairs, wiped it clean, and slid the picture out. Then I opened my old, worn Bible, the one no one ever touched, and tucked the photo inside, between the pages of Psalms and Proverbs. My memory might falter, but not my faith. A few days later, I heard my grandson laughing in the hallway. "Yo, check this out, new video's up," he said to someone on his phone. I watched from the stairs as he played a TikTok. In it, I was seen walking through the living room, mumbling to myself. "Where's my husband?" I asked in the video, my voice cracking. "Where did he go?" The caption read, "When Granny talks to ghosts and blames you for stealing the walls." The comments were worse. "Is she possessed? Someone call an exorcist. This is gold, keep filming her." I felt my knees weaken, but I held on to the railing. They were laughing at my grief, turning it into entertainment. I had become content. Later that night, I sat at the kitchen table pretending to knit, while they all scrolled through their phones. No one noticed me slip the small black recorder under the fruit bowl. That week, I overheard Haley talking on the phone. She keeps asking where the old photos went. I told her they burned in the attic leak last year. A pause. No, she doesn't remember the attic never leaked. That's the beauty of it. I recorded everything, every word. In my notebook, the one hidden behind the baking tins, I jotted down the lies, the dates, the tone of her voice, the look Paul gave her when he nodded, silent as ever. I wrote it all. Sometimes, I would deliberately walk through the house, holding my Bible, glancing around like I was lost. My grandson caught it on video again. This time, he edited in spooky music and ghost emojis. Granny wandering like she's in the upside down. Does she think her husband's photo lives in the walls? Let them laugh. Let the world see their cruelty broadcast for likes and follows. Because when the time came, I would have more than memories. I would have evidence. Haley thought she was smarter than me. That much was clear. One morning, I overheard her whispering in the laundry room. She was on the phone, her voice sharp, quick, but low enough to make it sound like she had something to hide. I stayed behind the corner, listening through the vent like a child in her own house. "Yes, I signed for her. She does not know," she said. "She cannot even spell her own name half the time." I heard her laugh, that sharp, staccato sound like nails on a chalkboard. "We're selling the old place, yes, the one in Pueblo. I found the paperwork in her drawer last month. I forged the signature, told the agent she has advanced dementia. Easy." But it was not. A week later, Haley came back from an appointment looking pale. Paul asked what happened. She shrugged and poured herself a glass of wine. "They flagged the signature," she muttered. "Apparently, her legal signature changed a year ago. There's a secondary trustee listed, some guy named LeBlanc. the sales frozen until he verifies everything. I smiled to myself for the first time in weeks. That was Frank. Frank LeBlanc, the estate attorney Marcia helped me hire. The man whose name no one in this house had ever bothered to learn. The house in Pueblo had been mine since before Paul was born. It was where Richard and I built our first home, where I planted roses that bloomed blood red every spring, and where I buried a time capsule with a note to my future self. Haley thought it was just old bricks and forgotten land, but it was my beginning, and I had no intention of letting it be stolen. That week, Haley called the doctor again. "She's becoming paranoid," she said, voice dripping with concern. "She's hiding things," whispering to herself. "I think she's hallucinating." A few days later, I was informed I would be taken for another cognitive evaluation. This time, a social worker would accompany us. Haley insisted it was routine, but I saw the panic behind her eyes. Her plan had cracked and she needed to re-establish control. On the drive to the clinic, I sat in the back seat, pretending to be confused. I stared out the window and asked once if we were going to church. Haley sighed. "No, Joanna. We've been over this." Then she leaned closer, her voice suddenly low and venomous. "You know, if you do not sign those new documents, I will have you committed. All it takes is a doctor's note. One bad test, one missed date, and you're out of here. No more bed, no more books, no more Bible, just 4 walls and a nurse who will not care what you forget." She smiled like it was a joke. But I had pressed record the second we pulled out of the driveway. Click. Saved. The evaluation was brief. I played dumb, got a few questions wrong, then corrected myself halfway through with an apologetic laugh. "You know how it is," I said sweetly. "Some days feel longer than others." The social worker raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. When we got home, I went straight to my room and pulled out the card I had kept in my drawer for years. Elena Torres. Once upon a time, I taught high school English. Elena had been one of my favorite students, sharp-tongued, brilliant, and stubborn as sin. She once rewrote Shakespeare's Macbeth from Lady Macbeth's point of view and made half the class cry. I had not seen her since her graduation day, but I followed her career in silence. Today, she was a successful author, a rising voice in nonfiction memoir, known for telling hard, forgotten stories of women who refused to stay quiet. I dialed the number. She picked up on the second ring. "Elena?" I asked. There was a pause. "Miss Bradford?" she said, her voice filled with disbelief. "Oh my God. I thought, are you okay?" "No," I said softly, "but I want to be. And I think I have a story." 2 days later, we met in a quiet cafe on the other side of town, far from the judgment of familiar eyes. She hugged me like no time had passed. We sat in a booth by the window, and I told her everything. About the missing photos, the forged documents, the social worker visits, the phone recordings, the lies. I showed her the notebook filled with months of observations, the USB drive with audio clips, the trust agreement, every ugly detail. She did not flinch once. "Elena," I whispered, "am I crazy for keeping all this?" She shook her head slowly. "No, ma'am, you're not crazy. You're careful. And you're not forgetting. You're remembering more clearly than anyone else." She pulled out a small recorder. "May I?" I nodded. She clicked it on. "Start wherever you want," she said. "We'll build it together." And just like that, the story of Joanna Bradford began not as a tragedy, but as a reckoning in progress. Haley's hatred toward me did not start the day she married Paul. No, it started long before that, when she was 17, and I was still standing in front of a chalkboard instead of a stove. She was my student then. Smart, no doubt about it, but arrogant in a way that made people uneasy. She had a need to be admired, not just liked. One afternoon, during final exams, I caught her turning in an essay that read like it had been written by someone twice her age. Because it had. I ran a plagiarism check before I even called her in. The entire paper was lifted word for word from an academic journal, a college-level article. She must have thought I would not notice. When I confronted her, she did not deny it, just looked at me with those flat, calculating eyes, "If I fail this class," she said, "my father will kill me. You know what kind of man he is." I did know. He was one of those men who donated to the school but never smiled, who shook hands like he was doing you a favor. He was the kind who punished quietly and left no proof. I should have followed protocol, reported her, had her suspended, but something in her voice, broken and bitter, made me pause. So I gave her a second chance. I let her rewrite the paper, under supervision. She passed, just barely. She never thanked me. When she showed up on Paul's arm at Thanksgiving 5 years later, I smiled and said nothing. She pretended not to recognize me. That was the first time I knew she had not forgiven me. The second time was on her wedding day, when she seated me at the overflow table near the kitchen, far from the head table, far from Paul, far from anyone I knew. She said it was an error in the seating chart. But it was not. I always knew she would come for me. I wrote in the first chapter of the memoir Elena and I, titled When Memory Speaks, but I never expected her to do it with my own son holding the door open. The book came together faster than I imagined, perhaps because I had been writing it in my heart for decades. Elena was relentless, precise, and gentle in all the right moments. I told her everything about Richard, about raising Paul, about the quiet sacrifices no one ever noticed. What Elena didn't know, at least not at first, was that I had written for most of my life. Not for fame, not for money, but for survival. In my younger years, after Richard and I married, I used to send short stories to small women's magazines under the pen name Mary Ember. They were stories about forgotten wives, about mothers who stayed too long, about old promises that curdled into secrets. Paul never knew. Haley never cared. Writing was the only part of myself I kept untouched, my private rebellion in a life built around pleasing others. When Elena found out, she was thrilled. "You already have a voice," she told me. "You just stopped using it under your real name. Let's bring Mary Ember back." So we did. And when she sent our first query to publishers, she used that name. Not Joanna Bradford, the widow from Colorado, but Mary Ember, the voice that had been silent for 50 years. The world, it turned out, remembered me better than my own family ever did. And then I told her about Haley. She listened without judgment. Her fingers moved like lightning on the keyboard. When I finished the story of the plagiarism, the silent grudge, and the manipulation that followed, she looked up and said, "That goes in. All of it." I nodded. We sent the first draft to 3 publishers under the name Mary Ember. 2 declined politely. 1 replied within 2 days, curious, not about the story itself, but about the woman who had disappeared for half a century and suddenly returned. "Your manuscript is powerful," the editor wrote. "But what we need is resolution. You've built a compelling case of injustice and betrayal. What readers will want now is closure, a visible triumph, something legal, something public." Elena read the email aloud. Then she looked at me with quiet fire. "Well," she said, "I guess we give them what they want." That night, I returned home with new purpose. Haley was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables like she was mad at them. Paul was watching sports. My grandson was upstairs, probably editing another video mocking me. I slipped away to the hallway, pulled the step stool from the closet, and reached up to the top shelf where I had hidden my small black case. Inside were 4 brand new recording devices and 2 pinhole cameras, courtesy of Elena's friend, a tech journalist who believed in justice. I placed 1 camera inside the ceramic vase in the dining room, another in the bookshelf, disguised inside a hollowed-out Reader's Digest. I taped a recorder under the hallway bench, another under the kitchen counter. Then I waited. Over the next 3 weeks, I gathered hours of footage, Haley yelling at me for moving things just to mess with her. Paul nodding while she told him, "We can't let her change the will. She's not right in the head." My grandson laughing as he scrolled through videos captioned, "My granny thinks I'm her husband." One night, Haley stood by my door and whispered through the crack, not knowing I was awake. "You're not getting away with it," she said. "You think you're clever. You're just old. I'm younger, and I always win." I recorded that too. By the end of the month, I had everything: threats, mockery, financial discussions, and medical lies. a full blueprint of how they planned to dismantle me. Elena cried when I gave her the files. "This," she said, "is your victory speech." I nodded, steady. "Not yet. First, they need to hear it in court." The courtroom smelled like dust and old wood, and something colder like betrayal frozen into the very benches we sat on. I had been here before, decades ago, as a juror, but this time, I was not in the audience. I was the subject, the case number, the woman they were trying to erase. Haley sat to my left, dressed in conservative navy, her hair pulled tight, her face a study in forced concern. Paul sat beside her, staring at his folded hands like maybe they held the answers he could never find on his own. Neither of them looked at me. Their lawyer stood first. "Your Honor," she began, "we are here today out of love. My clients are not here to punish Mrs. Joanna Bradford. They are here because they fear for her safety and their own. They've documented severe cognitive decline, forgetfulness, confusion, paranoia, erratic behavior." She paused for effect. "And they have video proof." The judge, a woman in her early 50s with steel-gray eyes, nodded. "Proceed." Haley's lawyer queued up a video on a small screen. It showed me wandering the living room, asking where my husband was. Another clip played of me placing a banana in the microwave. Paul looked genuinely embarrassed. Then came the audio. A recording of me calling Haley by the wrong name 3 times, another of me asking if it was Christmas in the middle of July. The lawyer turned to the judge. "These are clear indicators of advancing dementia. We request full guardianship and financial control before any irreversible decisions are made under compromised judgment." The judge nodded, made a few notes, then looked at my side of the bench. Defense? My lawyer, Mr. Arlo Green, stood calmly. He was tall, older, and deliberate in every word he spoke. "Your Honor, the evidence presented may appear damning, but only if you do not know what to look for." He stepped forward. "We will now play our own footage, unedited, time-stamped, and verified." The first video showed Haley in the car with me, whispering, "If you do not sign, I will have you committed." Then another, from the kitchen, Haley mocking me to my grandson. "She thinks the Bible talks back. Old bat's more theatrical than useful." The courtroom grew still. Next was Paul, asking quietly, "Is it illegal to move money before she dies?" Gasps. Then came the clip from the hallway, Haley whispering through my door, "You're just old, I'm younger. I always win." My lawyer clicked to the next slide, a notarized report from Dr. Marcia Bennett, Ph.D., a clinical psychologist. "Mrs. Bradford does not show signs of cognitive impairment. She exhibits strategic behavior consistent with protective response to domestic psychological abuse. Her mental faculties remain intact." Another document, from the state-appointed social worker. "Home visit confirms Mrs. Bradford is mentally competent. Conditions in household raise concern for elder psychological abuse." Haley's lawyer tried to object, but the judge raised a hand. "You'll have your chance." Then my lawyer looked at me. "Mrs. Bradford, would you like to speak?" I stood. My knees shook slightly, but my voice was steady. "I am not here because I forgot my son's name," I said. "I am here because I remembered who I was before they tried to convince me otherwise." I pulled a copy of my memoir from my bag. This is not just my story. It is evidence. It is the full account of what they tried to take, not just my money, but my memories, my dignity, and my silence. I read aloud a passage from Chapter 7. "I am old, but I have never forgotten kindness, and I have never, ever forgotten cruelty, especially when it sits at my table and calls itself family." The judge sat back, unreadable. She tapped her pen once, then spoke. "This court finds that the petitioners have failed to provide sufficient proof of cognitive incompetence. The court also finds credible evidence of coercion, manipulation, and attempted financial abuse." She turned to Haley and Paul. "The motion for guardianship is denied. Furthermore, I am referring this matter to the district attorney's office for potential charges of elder abuse and fraud." Haley's face drained of color. Paul looked like a man watching his house burn down from the inside. I did not smile. But I held my head high. The house fell silent after the court ruling. For once, no one spoke to me with that clipped, performative kindness. No more questions like, "Did you take your pills today, Mom?" Or, "Do you remember your name?" Just closed doors and footsteps that sounded like retreat. But the silence did not last. 2 days later, uniformed officers knocked on the door. They asked for Haley by name. She answered, still in her bathrobe, makeup half done like she had not slept. "Haley Bradford," one of them said, "you're being summoned for questioning regarding allegations of elder abuse, fraud, and document forgery." Paul tried to step in, his voice shaky. "She didn't do anything. This is a misunderstanding." But it was not. Haley had signed my name on real estate documents. She had submitted false claims to our insurance provider, listing me as incapacitated. The evidence was not just hearsay, it was video, audio, paper. They had enough to keep her busy with lawyers for years. Paul did not get arrested. No, he simply lost everything else. The company he worked for, a reputable firm in downtown Denver, called him into HR 3 days after the verdict. Word had spread fast. The video clips from court were circulating in circles far beyond the courtroom. "We value integrity," they told him. "And association with documented elder abuse violates our public ethics policy." He packed his office in silence. I know because I saw the pink slip. He left it on the kitchen counter, like maybe he wanted me to see it. I did not say a word. My grandson, once so smug with his camera, was not laughing either. The school board received a copy of his TikToks posted while under our roof, mocking me in front of millions. They did not think it was funny. They labeled it targeted harassment of a vulnerable adult. He was suspended first, then expelled, his scholarship gone. When he came into the kitchen that evening, eyes red, voice trembling, I almost felt something soften in me. Almost. "Grandma, I didn't mean for it to get that far," he said. "It was just jokes. Likes and views. Everyone does it." I looked at him, really looked, and for once, he saw me not as a broken woman, but as someone who had survived him. I said nothing. The next week, I met with Frank LeBlanc for the final time. We finalized the transfer of my entire estate properties, savings, bonds into a trust. It would be managed by a new nonprofit we formed, the Bradford Fund for Elder Justice. Our mission: to offer free legal aid to older adults facing family exploitation. I kept nothing in my own name, except the right to live in peace for the rest of my days. As for my will, I updated it quietly. No dramatic speeches, no announcements. The only beneficiary was Sophie Larkins, the girl from next door. 17 years old, always polite, always quiet. She used to slide a bottle of my prescription refills through the fence whenever Haley forgot to pick them up. She never said much, just left flowers sometimes, or brought over a warm plate. I saw her heart before anyone else did. She would inherit it all. The day the new documents were signed, I sat with Sophie on the porch. The sun was setting over the Colorado hills, painting everything gold. "Why me?" she asked softly. I patted her hand. "Because you never asked for anything. And you gave me everything I forgot I still had." The snow was soft beneath my boots, not heavy, not cruel, just present, like time itself. I walked slowly through the quiet street, the town still waking under a layer of winter hush. In my gloved hands, I held the very first printed copy of When Memory Speaks. My name sat on the cover in a font I never thought I would see in print. Not for fiction, not for fantasy, but for the truth. My truth. I wore the same coat Richard bought me 30 years ago. It was too big now, but it held warmth in places that no heater ever could. I did not look back at the house. Not at the porch where Haley once stood barking orders. Not at the window Paul never opened. That chapter had closed, and I had written the final period myself. The bookstore sat on Main Street, modest, familiar, lit from within like a hearth. When I stepped inside, I froze. They were waiting. Rows of women, gray-haired and bright-eyed, bundled in scarves and coats, holding copies of my book against their chests like it was something sacred. Some smiled with tears in their eyes. Others nodded, solemn and steady, like they already knew what I had endured. The store owner ushered me to a small table at the front. Elena was already there, beaming. She squeezed my hand. "You did it," she whispered. I opened the first book, uncapped the pen, and smiled at the woman before me. Her hands trembled as she handed it over. "For my daughter," she said. "She's going through something. Not so different." I nodded, signed my name. An hour later, near the end of the line, a familiar face appeared. Sophie, no makeup, no polish, just honesty in her eyes. "I don't want a copy for me," she said quietly. "I want one for my mother." She never believed me when I told her what was happening next door. I opened the book and wrote, "For the girl who left light where no one else remembered to." Then I took out a second copy, one I had saved. I opened it slowly, the spine still crisp, and wrote a single line on the title page. "For the one who used no words, just kindness, and one little pill bottle at a time." I closed the book, held it to my chest, and breathed deep. I used to fear forgetting. That time would take away what mattered before I could speak it aloud. But now I know. It was fear itself that helped me remember who truly mattered. Some nights, I still hear the echo of their voices, Paul's indifference, Haley's biting commands, my grandson's laughter behind the camera. They used to haunt me. Now, they remind me. Not of the pain, but of how far I walked through it, barefoot and silent, until I found my voice again. People ask me if I feel regret. "Would you go back and do it differently?" they say. "Would you fight sooner? Speak louder?" I smile, and I say, no, because if I had shouted earlier, I might never have heard what silence taught me. See, silence is not weakness, it is storage. It is where memories rest, where plans form, where women like me survive long enough to outlast those who tried to erase us. Now I wake up in a small cottage just outside Boulder, surrounded by the smell of pine and the sound of wind that doesn't ask questions. The house is quiet, but not empty. It's filled with letters, hundreds of them, sent by women who watched my story and said, "That was me. I was the forgotten one. I was the caregiver who never got thanked. I was the mother they called useless after I paid off their debts." And to every single letter, I write back. Sometimes just a line, sometimes a page, but always the same ending. You still matter. You are not what they said you were, and you are never too old to tell the truth. The truth is the most dangerous thing a woman can carry into old age, because no one expects her to still have it. But when she does, it changes everything. So if you're still listening, if your heart is beating just a little heavier right now, then maybe, just maybe, it is your turn to remember. And when you're ready, we're here, waiting, listening, holding space for the next truth to be told. This is not just my story. This is our story, and it's only just beginning. Thank you for listening to my story. If it made you feel something, anger, hope, maybe even a little strength you forgot you had, then I've done what I came here to do. There are so many voices like mine out there. Quiet women, forgotten women, women who were told to sit down and stay silent. But silence has an expiration date, and this is where it ends. If you believe stories like mine deserve to be heard, please subscribe to Grandma True Stories. Here, we remember. Here, we speak. And here justice never comes too late. Thank you for being part of this. I'll see you in the next story.